Today on CityCast Chicago, even before federal prohibition began back in 1920, a small pocket of what is now Ravenswood and Lincoln Square had already banned the sale of alcohol. Well, almost 100 years after prohibition ended, this small stretch of the neighborhood and all of the businesses in it are still banned from selling liquor. And if you live there, you may see a measure on your ballot that's taking aim at that century-old law. Today, I'm talking with the restaurant owner who's behind this push. It's Monday, November 4th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Now, if you're like me, you was probably a little shocked or confused to hear about this Prohibition era ban, but you know who else was a little surprised? The alderperson in the area.
I am Matt Martin. I am the alderman of the 47th Ward. It's the first time we've dealt with something like that since I got into office in 2019. So I was surprised that this was an issue that still existed. I can't say that I was shocked because obviously we went through a big prohibition era in Chicago and elsewhere. So I'm sure there are vestiges of that continue to this day. Also, we have liquor moratoria in place in various parts of my ward, probably most every other ward across the city. So I recognize that we have a number of different levers that we pull from time to time to make it easier or harder for businesses to sell alcohol. I was nevertheless surprised that this particular stretch of Montrose, which has several businesses, that has a lot of foot traffic, had this prohibition in place, and then was even more surprised to learn about the genesis of the ban, which dates back over 100 years to approximately 1907, when someone was looking to establish a German beer hall and a small theme park close to what is now Wells Park. There was a significant amount of opposition from certain residents at that time. They got this ban in place. Fast forward 117 years, it's still in place.
We're now joined by Lucia Erdejon, the co-owner of Xochimilco, a Mexican restaurant that opened in Ravenswood back in 2018. Lucia, can you tell me when and how you first found out that your restaurant was in what's known as a dry district or a dry precinct?
So we found out October of 2023. We applied for a liquor license, started the process in June of 2023. We filled out paperwork, ran background checks, got all the things we needed to be up to code. Finally, in October, we had inspectors come out, health inspector, building, fire, 4 different inspectors. And then that day after we passed all the inspections, we find out through an email that this is a dry area and somehow it was overseen.
Mm-hmm. When you all moved into the neighborhood, when you were putting up your restaurant, even if liquor wasn't a part of your initial plan, is this not something that's informed to you all by the alder, by the real estate, the realtors? Like, is this just sort of left out of the entire process?
From what we've heard, it's not something that anyone ever knew. We've talked with a restaurant not far from us who had tried in the past applying for a liquor license. And at that point, they were told no, because there's a school there. But it was never no, because it's a dry area.
Got it. When you talk to some of the other small business owners, some of the other people who live in the neighborhood, was this common knowledge that people know about this law?
We actually found out many of the neighbors who live here did not know. They've been in the neighborhood 20, 30 years. Were not aware that this was a dry precinct, that the 3 blocks that they live in couldn't serve alcohol, even though across the street, there's bars and restaurants and all sorts. So it was just kind of a shocker to know that in Lincoln Square, Ravenswood, there's still dry precinct because nobody knew.
And I was going to say, there is nobody around who would ever remember that law coming to effect back in 1907. So it sounds like just one of those things sort of lost to the annals of history, still being applied in the area. You kind of talk about it a little bit, but for any other business in Chicago that isn't in this dry precinct, what is the process like to obtain a liquor license? I mean, you just was describing it and it sounded extremely cumbersome.
It is time consuming. So we decided you could do it yourself, but we decided to hire an attorney to help with paperwork and kind of alleviate the process. But you do things from background check to, making sure you have the correct paperwork, everything is up to date. And then you have to go through inspectors. You have to get insurance as if you already had a liquor license, even though you are only applying for a liquor license.
Right.
And it's a long process.
When you found out that seemingly all of that was for nothing, what was your reaction when you're told, oh, I'm sorry, a 1907 era law is preventing you from moving forward despite you having already spent all of this money?
I guess it was, disappointing knowing that you're, putting everything into a project that you're hoping will turn out. And then, it's kind of like, you're given a green light because that once inspectors come out, like, you will be granted a liquor license if everything goes well. So, going through the day and everything went fine, we were like, okay, it's probably a matter of a month and we'll have our liquor license. And then that same day we find out like, oh, actually you can't get a liquor license. Trying to turn it just kind of added more into this. We had to wait, finding out in October, we had to wait to August to start kind of, moving on from trying to be put on the ballot to try to turn it for anyone who lives in the 3 blocks to be able to vote. And this is the 9th precinct.
I mean, businesses like Small Cheval, which is planning on opening in the area, is also asking people to vote no on the alcohol ban. Can you tell me, all right, you have to switch over from this process of trying to obtain a liquor license for your business to now advocating for an amendment on a ballot for an entire precinct. What was that process like, you having to move from like small business owner to like small local politician in some ways? What was the process like to get something on the ballot, and what did you all do to make your neighbors aware?
So we actually did so much, from being very active on our social media, letting everybody know what we were doing at all times, going door to door. We created these posters that we would put on every single door. And even now, moving forward, trying to advertise, because it's kind of like, an odd question. Vote no, as opposed to, everyone is so used to yes, yes, yes.
Yes, the way that it's written is, shall the prohibition of the sale at retail of alcohol liquor be continued in the 9th precinct of the 47th ward of the city of Chicago? Yes, that question, if you go in, it could be as simple as like, are you okay with them selling alcohol in the precinct? And then you could just vote yes. This is the case where if you want them to sell alcohol, you have to vote no on the language of the amendment or the referenda. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about this process, how the wording got developed. How do you actually get it on the ballot?
Yeah. So in order to be put on the ballot, we needed 150 signatures. There are 497 registered voters in these 3 blocks. So we had to make sure we literally dedicated a whole week. Our attorney, his kids, the staff here, my husband, my brother, everyone came out and was literally going door to door. And it's not like, you walk it once. This is something that we constantly have to do every day, 3 times a day, because it's not likely that you're going to find anybody home the first time you go around.
I mean, how long after you all found out about the ban did you start this process? Like, what motivated you to think, okay, we're not just going to accept this is the way it is. We're going to push forward through this process to see if we can get it reversed?
So we had an option to just kind of, pull back, and we were like, no, we can end here. Or we could have continued. And my husband is that type of person. He's like, no, we are going to finish. We started no matter what it takes. We're going to push through.
That's amazing to hear. So once you got the signatures you needed, which, like you said, only 497 people in this 3-block radius, you all needed like 30% of the registered voters to not only be aware of this, but to sign your petition. How long did it take from the moment you started gaining signatures to you actually seeing the language on the ballot?
So it took us about a week to get over 150 signatures. And then once it was submitted to the city, it was within 2.5 weeks that we got the news that it was approved by the city and it was going to be put on the ballot.
Okay, so not a very long process. How has the city responded to this as you all have, brought more and more attention to it? Because I know this isn't just in Ravenswood. These districts are kind of spread across the city in their own ways.
I feel like everyone has been very supportive and positive with what we're trying to do. And then just seeing other businesses like Unite come together, try to help.
When you've been going from door to door, has anybody gone, hey, no, I don't want this? Me and my kids in the neighborhood, we don't want another restaurant that is selling alcohol. Has anybody pushed back to this idea and they say, no, keep our 3-block district pre-World War I?
We have had a few doors that we knocked, maybe like 3 from the whole 3 blocks, where they were like, no, absolutely not. But one family who actually like sat there and explained, because I felt disrespectful asking them like, well, why won't you, give me a signature?
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of like it was more of a thing that they grew up in. They grew up in a house of alcohol was a response that we got.
I understand. So it was a very personal reason. So if residents vote to ditch the ban, according to Block Club Chicago, 3 businesses will be applying for liquor licenses for the first time in over a century. Why is it important for your business and other businesses to be able to sell alcohol, especially at a time when we see an increase in like BYOB restaurants? Why is this important for y'all's business?
So selling alcohol will give us a little bit more stability. When we first started the business, we were never considering a liquor license, because it was easy to find everything. And then, since pandemic, inflation, prices have risen, and it's just, certain months are hard to stay open. You have to make sure you really budget yourself on busy months to make it through the slow ones. Mm-hmm. We have had a few of our guests, they walk in and they're like, well, we want a margarita. And you're like, yeah.
Of course they do.
Yes, I'll serve you something else. Can't serve a margarita. And we've had a few walk out. Others will ask like, okay, well, is there a liquor store where I can get a glass of wine or beer or anything?
Mm-hmm. Lucia, I imagine there are some people listening who go, all right, I'm going to stop by. She sounds really nice. I bet the food is smacking, but what kind of drinks y'all going to be making if they get rid of this ban? You said margarita, but like what kind of cocktails, what kind of drinks are you excited to serve up to your customers?
So I feel like we make a very good non-alcoholic mix now. Which is, freshly squeezed lime juice, organic blue agave, and water, which is very simple for a mix, but it's very good. So now being able to have a liquor license, like you can just make it better. It's not the same, serving a non-alcoholic margarita as opposed to like shaking a margarita. Where you can play with flavors, ingredients, and our food. It's not, even though we are a Mexican restaurant, it's not just a traditional Mexican restaurant. We like to add a twist. We like to change things up. We like to play with different ingredients. And I feel like that would carry over to our bar, where we're not just selling a margarita, we're selling maybe like smoked pineapple infused jalapeno margarita.
I see what you're putting down. You've gone from being a community member, a small business owner, to someone who's had to go face to face to people, asking them not only to vote, but to vote for an ordinance that particularly supports your restaurant and your business. What have you learned more about your community, meeting more of your neighbors?
So I've learned from my community and from myself, from both actually. First of all, like it is a very welcoming, lovely community, very supportive. Just seeing anyone willing to help, putting businesses that were not in the 3 blocks, willing to hang the signs that we are hanging on our windows, in their windows to support, Same thing with the neighbors. We had a few days ago, we were giving out yard signs and we put it on our social media, and anyone who saw it, they stopped by just to get a yard sign. Like it's a sign of support. Like that's just beautiful. Anyone willing to help.
I really appreciate you. I think this story highlights a few important things for our listeners. Maybe in some respects, how easy it can be to take part in the ballot process, getting a referendum on the books, giving us some insight on what it looks like to even in just a small precinct in a 3-block radius, what it looks like to connect with your neighbors, reach out. We know some of the other referenda people are going to see on their ballots may cover larger wards, may cover, some of these questions are statewide, but I do think it's important for us to have a better sense of what this process looks like on a local level. And so I really appreciate you offering us insight into that.
Thank you.
Lucia Edejon is the co-owner of Xochimilco, a Mexican restaurant in Ravenswood. Again, if you live in the area, you are going to see this referenda question on your ballot. Shall the prohibition of the sale at retail of alcoholic liquor be continued in the 9th precinct of the 47th ward of the city of Chicago? If you would like to see this designation removed, vote no. If you'd like to see it continue, vote yes. Again, join me in thanking Lucia. Thank you for stopping by CityCast Chicago.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get out of here, today is the last day to nominate your favorites for Chicago Readers Best of Chicago 2024. You can nominate CityCast Chicago for Best Podcast and Hey Chicago for Best Email Newsletter in the City Life category. Of course, I'm going to drop a link in the show notes. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, are y'all really the best? I mean fair. I'd like to think if you've been here for a minute, you wouldn't be asking that, but it is a fair question. So do me this one favor. Head over to our website at chicago.citycast.fm. After you catch up on some old podcast episodes, go through all of our recent articles, our walking guides, 3 questions, urban almanacs, best food and drink list, election guides, Chicago Explained segments, yada, 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 then you could be the judge of that. I'm thinking by the end of all of that, you're going to feel comfortable nominating us for Best Podcast and Best Email Newsletter. Of course, I can't let you go without some good news. College basketball season is upon us, and we got some crosstown matchups ahead of us. Tonight, Loyola's men's team are home against the Chicago State Cougars. Next Tuesday, we got Loyola's women's team home against the DePaul Blue Demons. That same night, the UIC Flames men's team heads up to Evanston to see the Northwestern Wildcats. As always, I appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. I know I said one favor earlier, but it's actually, after that rundown, it's probably like 13 now. But maybe the most important, be back here bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace. Next Tuesday, we got Loyola women's team home against the Blue. I'm all over the place.